Public water fluoridation has been part of the discourse lately.
Fluoride.
Fluoride. Fluoride. Fluoride.
Fluoride.
I have always taken for granted that water fluoridation is good and a huge win for public health. But lots of people disagree with that due to real research showing that high levels of fluoride in water can decrease IQ in young children and potentially be a neurotoxin. Now, some of this argument takes place in the media and a whole bunch of it takes place in the scientific literature. So I want to avoid the shouting and get to the real information because very truthfully and honestly, I want to be able to be an informed participant in these conversations. I spent 5 years getting a degree in doing my own research, so might as well put it to work. Today is my first big research gathering day. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to go through my outline and figure out what papers are going to help me answer all these questions. How do I wade into this as a bold science communicator and decide that I'm gonna absorb and comprehend decades of research in like 3 weeks? So I'm not going to, right? But that also means today I'm trying to figure out who are the fluoride researchers that I'm trying to talk to. And I think it's hard to do sometimes. The media can fall into the trap of just picking one person on each side of a debate and putting them against each other. And we know that sometimes can give the public a false idea of how the underlying scientific community feels about a topic. I sat down and I thought about what I knew and what I didn't know about fluoride, and I came up with 7 big questions that I want to answer. We'll start with, what does fluoride do for your teeth? Fluoride works to protect your teeth in 3 ways. It reduces demineralization, it promotes remineralization, and it inhibits bacterial growth.
When you drink fluoridated water or brush with fluoridated toothpaste, fluoride ions wind up in the biofilm on your teeth. From there, they travel with bacterial acid into the crystal structure of the enamel where they replace a hydroxyl group on hydroxyapatite to become fluorapatite. Fluorapatite is much more resistant to acid and can keep your tooth enamel strong. Same with these 2 eggs. I smeared this one in fluoridated toothpaste for a day and left this one alone. And when I cover them in vinegar, you can see that the fluoride-treated egg is much more resistant to the acid breakdown than the not treated one.
And a 2015 meta-analysis that looked at 155 studies found that water fluoridation reduces caries, basically tooth decay, by 35% in primary teeth and 26% in permanent teeth. In the 1940s, Grand Rapids, Michigan started adding fluoride to their tap water after researchers in the early 20th century discovered 2 things. One, that children who grew up in towns with high levels of fluoride in their water often suffered from dark brown mottling on their teeth, now called fluorosis. And 2, that those same children had almost no dental cavities. The levels of fluoride they added were titrated to keep teeth healthy while reducing fluorosis risk, and over the next 15 years, the incidence of cavities in children born after fluoridation dropped by 60%, making tooth decay a preventable disease for the first time in history. Fluoride in water works to prevent dental decay. That is not what's in question in public debate. But what is in debate is if water is the best delivery method for it. So is there a difference between ingestion and topical application for dental health? Most results point to the idea that fluoride is most effective topically. So if we can brush with it, swish with it, chew it, that seems to be the most effective. Did you ever have those fluoride rinse days at school or have to sit for 60 seconds with fluoride trays in your mouth? These are other strategies that modern dentistry uses to get that fluoride where it needs to go. I hated those trays though. They always made me feel like I couldn't breathe. But the thing is, modern dentistry is really different from dentistry in 1945 when adding fluoride to water began. Fluoride-containing toothpaste and mouthwash is in basically every grocery store, and while access to dental care isn't perfect, because why are my special face bones not covered by my normal health insurance? Dental care is certainly more widespread. So do we really need to be adding fluoride to water in 2025? In fact, this review... Are you a meta-analysis or a review? People will be grumpy. This is a review. There was even a review from 2024 that found that while community water fluoridation seemed to lead to a greater reduction in dental caries in kids, it potentially had smaller effect sizes than in pre-1975 studies back before dental care was what it is now. So what happens if we start taking fluoride out of places where we've added it? I was just driving to the grocery store, and it's rare that I get to work on a story that is so topical. There was a story on NPR about a city council member from Calgary talking about how when he was first elected about 10 years ago, they removed fluoride from the water and then they saw an increase in the incidence of dental caries, and now the residents wanted the fluoride back. Gonna go look at the sources. The study found a significantly higher rate of dental caries, especially in primary teeth, in kids in Calgary. A local hospital also saw that the number of dental infections in children that were so bad that they required IV antibiotics for treatment also increased by 700%. Calgary voted to start adding fluoride back into their water in 2021. 2025, we still have evidence that adding fluoride to water decreases dental decay. So why is there any question about fluoride in water? It's because over the past 2 decades, a number of studies have shown that children exposed to high levels of fluoride during development have lower IQs. So this goes back to one of my original questions: does fluoride have neurological effects at community water fluoridation levels? One of the most high profile, which sparked a lot of controversy, was a study also out of Canada. It used a data set called MyRec, which looked at environmental exposures during pregnancy. The researchers looked specifically at fluoride, and they looked at both a subset of women who had given urine samples and a subset of women who had self-reported fluoride exposures during pregnancy. They compared these to children's IQs at ages 3 and 4. They found that higher fluoride exposures during pregnancy, as measured by urinary levels, were related to lower IQ in boys. And as measured by self-reported consumption studies, higher fluoride intake meant lower IQs in all children by about 3 to 4 IQ points. The authors and proponents of this study suggested that pregnant people should watch their fluoride consumption and that baby formula should be made with non-fluoridated bottled water. There have been some strong criticisms of this paper for things like how they measured maternal fluoride exposure using urine samples and for how they addressed the results to the public. And this got personal and heated. There were letters sent calling for resignations. And knowing all of that, when I read this paper, my reaction was kind of like, oh, that's it? This felt like an interesting result that should be followed up on, but not the giant smoking gun that the media and literature war seems to make it out to be. I mean, look at these graphs. Sure, there is an association here, but it doesn't seem damning. And especially considering that the maternal exposure on the right was estimated using things they knew about the mothers and their habits, not directly tested, it just seemed kind of overblown. Should more research be done to follow up on this? Absolutely. But for me, the study was just kind of like a, okay, that's interesting result. It wasn't like, whoa. But the MyRec study is not the only study that has found an association between higher fluoride levels and lower IQ. In mid-2024, the National Toxicology Program released an initial analysis of 74 studies that looked at fluoride exposure in a children's IQs and found, quote, a statistically significant association between higher fluoride exposure and lower children's IQ scores, showing that the more fluoride a child is exposed to, the more likely that child's IQ will be lower than if they were not exposed. Community water fluoridation in the United States is currently recommended to be 0.7 milligrams per liter or 0.7 parts per million of fluoride in water. The optimal range used to be 1.2 milligrams per liter in some parts of the US. Colder places where they assumed you might drink less water had a higher recommended level of fluoride than hot places where they assumed that you would drink more water. But we're now at 0.7. The World Health Organization recommends a standard of 1.5 milligrams per liter. The studies in the NTP monograph I just mentioned looked at many communities whose fluoride levels were much higher than this in the 1.5 milligram per liter levels, due to naturally occurring fluoride in the water. Also, most of these studies were performed outside of the US, with many of the studies occurring in China, India, and Iran, and other international locations. The NTP report specifically said that it could not make conclusions about the safety of community water fluoridation, but instead was focused on the risks of high fluoride levels. From this data, it seems pretty clear that high levels of fluoride in water could negatively impact IQ levels in children. The scientific article version of this paper came out in JAMA Pediatrics on January 6th, along with 2 editorials commenting on it, one positively and one negatively. I always know going into these things that I'm gonna have to read more research than I think I'm gonna have to read, but this really was sliding in at the 11th hour. The main article breaks apart the 74 studies into ones that they considered to have high bias and ones that have low bias, which is their way of classifying how rigorous, and yes, biased or unbiased a study is. What I wanted to know was what the high quality, low bias studies said about fluoride levels below 1.5 milligrams per liter. And the abstract said, quote, among the subset of low risk of bias studies, there were inverse associations when exposed groups were restricted to less than 4 milligrams per liter, less than 2 milligrams per liter, and less than 1.5 milligrams per liter for analyses of fluoride measured both in water and in urine, which makes it sound like there were adverse effects below 1.5 milligrams per liter in water levels. But if you go look at the 3 studies that met those qualifications, the association is not statistically significant. It's really frustrating that these studies are mostly looking at water fluoride levels far above what we add to water here in the United States. So I feel the need to document that this is how I'm spending my Sunday night internet, with chips and guacamole and science papers. For you, internet. For you. To our knowledge, no studies of fluoride exposure and children's IQ have been performed in the United States. They say in here that this was not designed to address the broader public health implications of water fluoridation in the United States. But that's not how it's being reported in the media. Why? Why have we done this in Canada and in Mexico and in all of these other places and not here? Is there just that nobody wants to fund it and it's like a big annoying study to do? Is it really that like we just didn't realize until recently that this was something we should do? Yeah, I don't know. I'm frustrated. I'm gonna add what I think is an important note here, that there are about 2.9 million people in the US living in communities where water fluoride levels do exceed WHO recommended levels above 1.5 milligrams per liter due to natural groundwater fluoride. Now, these studies indicate to me that we do need to be talking about how to lower fluoride levels in those communities. That feels like a public health initiative that could do some meaningful good based on these results. But that is not what any of the headlines or arguments are actually talking about right now. Part of the problem is that these studies are observational, not experimental. But all of this left me with even more questions. First of all, do a few IQ points here or there even matter? On a person-to-person level, probably not, but on a population level, maybe. How reliable, also, is testing a child's IQ? How do we compare studies that are looking at all different levels of fluoride exposure? Many are using different methods of testing IQ or cognition, and almost none of them are looking directly at the IQ effects on communities here in the US who are exposed due to community water fluoridation. And again, that was really frustrating to me, and I spent a lot of time on Google Scholar trying to find something like this, a big, longitudinal prospective study of the effects of community water fluoridation on IQ levels in children in the US, and it's not really out there. Now, some people have tried similar things. For example, a paper published in December of 2024 looked at Australians who have a similar water fluoridation program to us. They looked at adults who had been exposed or not to community water fluoridation under the age of 5 and found no connection between adult intelligence and fluoride exposure. Now, the N is small here, it is under 400 people, but they just found no difference. Like, these are some of the most boring graphs you have ever seen. Just like, nada. There was also a study that followed people in New Zealand for 38 years that found similar results. No dramatic historical decreases in IQ have been seen following widespread implementation of community water fluoridation or worldwide introduction of fluoride toothpastes. Instead, historical comparisons have documented substantial IQ gains across countries since the mid-1900s. We've been doing community water fluoridation, we've been giving people fluoride in their toothpaste, people drink tea a lot, and we just don't see like a dramatic. Like, people didn't just get stupider. Like, all jokes aside, it's not like we started community water fluoridation and everyone just got less intelligent. There's no data to suggest that. But I'm gonna be honest at this point that I am exhausted. I've been doing this for weeks now. Most people do not have jobs that let them do stuff like this. We cannot all be doing all this reading. We have other jobs to do and other issues that we need to be informed on. And these are just the highlights of this research. And I know down in the comments, you're gonna tell me that I missed your favorite paper or your favorite piece of data on this. But like, this video cannot be 3 hours long. Producer Elaine will kill me. So I asked some experts, how do you balance the positive dental health benefits of fluoride with potential negative mental health benefits? The predominant sense is that we need to be doing a risk-benefit analysis here. Most people felt that fluoride is beneficial for dental health and that keeping some level of it in tap water has protective dental health benefits for kids here in the US. But that fluoride can be neurotoxic at high levels, especially in places where it's naturally occurring in groundwater, but that the data suggests it's not a problem at levels currently recommended in the US. Risk-benefit analysis. The dose makes the poison. That is what I have landed on in this whole conversation. Fluoride is bad at super high levels, but it's necessary and even protective at low ones. We need better data to make a conclusive statement about where the dose that's beneficial dentally, but not detrimental cognitively, lies. And based on all of this, I think the data points to the fact that we seem to be pretty close to it with our like 0.7 milligrams per liter level. I think that we should keep community water fluoridation at the current levels. But this is my personal opinion. It is not one of any organization. I am not a public health official. I am just someone trying to be really informed about this issue and feel confident in how I talk about it and how I vote on it and all that kind of stuff. I do, however, also think that we need longer term, bigger observational studies in the United States of whether or not community water fluoridation at our levels in our communities has any effect on IQ. I hope this was helpful. Please don't send me death threats.